evening, and welcome to History for Your Sleep. You're safe here, and you can let your mind settle for a moment. Take a slow, comfortable breath, and allow the day to loosen its weight around you. If these calm journeys bring you peace, you may subscribe whenever it feels right, quietly, naturally, without any hurry at all. Now, a gentle story begins. Tonight, we step into ancient Babylon, a world of sun-baked walls, cool courtyards, slow rivers, rising ziggurats, and quiet footsteps moving through shaded alleys. A place where mornings warmed the earth like soft clay, where rooftops held the night's cool breath, and where life unfolded in small, steady rhythms beneath the wide Mesopotamian sky. Let us wander there, slowly, softly, and let Babylon rise around us in the calm of the night. But there is one detail we rarely notice. For all the stories about kings and towers, ancient Babylon was, before anything else, a place where people simply woke up, breathed the morning air, and began another day. Morning arrives quietly over the land of Babylon. The light does not rush in. It seeps slowly across the flat horizon, sliding over the alluvial plain between the Tigris and the Euphrates. At first, the sky holds only a pale, washed-out gray. Then a faint band of gold appears in the east, touching the crowns of palm trees and brushing the edges of mudbrick roofs. For a brief moment, the air remains cool, carrying the soft smell of river mud and of cooking fires that faded during the night. In this gentle hour, the legendary city feels simple, almost tender, a place just beginning to move. From a quiet distance, Babylon slowly takes shape. It is not a city of sharp stone or glittering towers. It is a city of earth. Walls, terraces, houses, and streets rise from the same warm clay beneath them. Massive ramparts and double walls stand against the brightening sky, their outlines steady and familiar. Beyond them, the plain stretches wide in every direction, broken only by canals, date palms, and scattered villages. A faint haze already hovers above the ground, hinting at the heat that will come later. For now, the light is soft. It reveals details gently. A rooftop ladder, a bundle of reeds, the dark opening of a courtyard gate. Yet the land around Babylon holds a quiet truth. This place is naturally dry, almost harsh. Without careful guidance, nothing here would grow. As the sun climbs higher, the canals become visible, straight, deliberate lines etched across the plain. They pull water from the Euphrates into fields of barley, date groves, vegetable plots, and small orchards. Reeds whisper softly along their edges. Insects hide in low shrubs, waiting for warmth. In some seasons, floodwater brings fresh silt and life. In others, it rises too far, nipping at fields and licking at the foundations of houses and canals. Blessing and danger live here side by side. Inside the city, the streets answer this land. The broad processional ways run straight and wide, built for royal chariots and ceremonial marches. Now, in the early stillness, their paving stones are cool and faintly damp from the night air. But most of Babylon is not grand avenues. It is narrow, turning lanes that breathe shade into the morning. Upper walls lean inward. Reed screens soften the sun. Light falls in long, thin strips across the ground, leaving cool patches of shadow beneath them. The air here carries its own quiet blend of scents. Clay bricks warming slowly, dust from wool, a trace of sesame oil, and the faint sourness of beers settling in jars. If you follow the sound of moving water, you reach the Euphrates, the river that threads through the heart of the city. At dawn, it runs wide and unhurried, its surface dark under the pale sky. Wooden boats rest against quays tied with thick ropes. Their hulls scrape lightly against the stone. Stairs worn smooth by countless bare feet lead down toward the water. A thin mist sometimes rises from the river, blurring the line between air and surface. Boatmen who slept nearby stretch their backs, check their knots, and look toward the sky to judge the day ahead. Above the rooftops, a different world begins to glow. Temple towers and ziggurats lift themselves into the morning, stepped upward like mountains made by human hands. They do not shine sharply, they warm gradually, their bricks catching the first strong light of day. These high places hold the sunrise longer than the homes below, as if the day bows to the gods before it bends down into the streets. Yet, for all its monuments, Babylon is mostly lived-in space. Courtyards open inward, offering families small squares of sky. On rooftops, mats remain spread where people slept in the open air to escape the night's lingering heat. A jar of water waits in the shade, its surface moist and cool. Reed baskets lean against walls. Clay bins half buried in the ground keep grain safe for coming meals. Life here is not carved in stone. It is pressed into clay, woven into reed, carried in hands that move through these spaces day after day. As light strengthens, the climate begins to show its voice. Babylon's summers are intense, the kind of heat that settles deeply and does not soften. The sky grows clear and unblinking. Dust lifts easily from bare soil, carried by hot winds through streets and courtyards. Shade becomes a treasure. Awnings, high walls, roof edges, all become tools for survival. People adjust their hours, rising early, resting at midday, saving the gentler tasks for when the sun begins to sink. Winters bring a different sharpness. The air turns cool, sometimes biting, especially when wind sweeps across the flat land. Mudbrick houses, warm in daylight, lose heat quickly at night. People draw cloaks tighter, light more lamps, gather near hearths. Smoke deepens and settles into clothing. Some mornings arrive wrapped in a faint chill that touches jars, doorways, and courtyard stones. It is not a northern winter, but it reaches the bones all the same. Beyond the walls, the landscape stays simple and wide. Barley fields shift from muted green to gold to pale stubbled earth after harvest. Date palms rise tall and dark, their crowns catching wind and sun. Canals carve precise lines into the plain, like a careful script written in earth. Herds move in the distance, sheep, goats, donkeys, each watched by a figure made small by the endless horizon. Earth and sky stretch into a single quiet line, unbroken, calm, waiting. In this vast setting, Babylon breathes. It wakes layer by layer. Doors creak softly as wooden hinges warm. Low voices rise from rooftops. Animals shift on packed earth floors. Somewhere, unseen, the first grindstone begins to turn as someone prepares grain for the morning meal. Light, air, sound, and movement, the city opens like a slow exhale. Nothing here stands alone. The high walls hold the smells and voices of the city. The canals feed fields and villages that feed the markets. The river brings boats, goods, and news. Even the sky above is part of this network, its stars read by priests who watch for patterns that tie heaven to the fate of those below. In the soft, widening morning, Babylon reveals itself not as legend, but as a living world. Dust and water, heat and shade, sacred tower and quiet courtyard. It is the glint of sunlight on water, the press of bare feet on clay, the low call of a donkey in a distant lane. A city shaped calmly by land and climate, growing slowly across generations under the same wide sky. And from this gentle beginning, the path moves inward, toward homes, courtyards, and rooftops, where the real texture of daily life waits quietly to be seen. But when we look a little closer, another layer of Babylon quietly appears. It is not the Babylon of legends or carved tablets. It is the Babylon that people walked through every day. And there is one detail we rarely think about. A great city does not feel grand when you stand inside it. It feels intimate, shaded, warm, and full of small movements that guide the rhythm of life. Morning light reaches the high walls first. The great ramparts turn a soft honey color, while the streets below remain dim and cool. As the sun rises, shadows slide down the brick surfaces like slow-moving cloth, revealing the city one courtyard at a time. The famous fortifications, the same ones travelers once called wonders of the world, come alive quietly in this gentle light. They are massive, yes, but at dawn, they feel less like monuments and more like calm guardians, a protective outline wrapped around the waking city. Inside those walls, everything feels closer. The broad ceremonial avenues, the long, straight roads used for royal processions, stand almost empty at this hour. Their stones hold the night's coolness, and the air above them carries faint traces of dust and the memory of last night's lamps. These streets were designed for grandeur, but daily life rarely passed through them. The true pulse of Babylon lived elsewhere, in the narrow alleys where people moved, worked, and breathed together. Those alleys are one of the city's quiet wonders. They twist gently between mud-brick houses, adjusting themselves to walls that lean or share space. Above them, the sky narrows into a thin blue ribbon. Sunlight enters only at certain angles, turning drifting dust into soft golden lines. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, packed clay in some places, scattered pottery shards in others. Doors open directly into the alley, but windows almost never do. Privacy matters in this dense world, and homes protect it with plain, unbroken walls. As you walk farther, you feel how tightly the houses cluster together. Most share at least one wall with another, forming compact blocks that help keep out the heat. Because of this closeness, sound carries easily. A broom sweeping a courtyard, a child dropping a jar, a dog trotting through an alley. Each sound moves lightly along the walls. Voices soften into echoes. Laughter and arguments blend into a single, calm, city-wide murmur. Yet, hidden within this shaded maze is a very different kind of space. The Euphrates flows through Babylon like a slow, living spine. It divides the city, yet it binds it just as strongly, carrying boats full of grain, reeds, timber, and goods from distant regions. In the early hours, the river's surface is dark and smooth, disturbed only by the rocking of moored boats or the gentle dip of a paddle. Mud-brick quays step downward toward the water, their edges worn by countless bare feet. Warehouse doors face the river, some closed, some already open for merchants preparing for the day. The scent rising from the river is unmistakable, cool, earthy, slightly metallic. It mixes with the dryness of reed bundles and the faint sweetness of nearby date palms. For many lands, rivers are borders. For Babylon, the river is breath. If you look back toward the skyline, the sacred rises above everything else. Temples and ziggurats stand calm and tall, their upper terraces glowing gold in the early sun. The great ziggurat, Etemenanki, seems to blur into the morning haze, not sharp or overwhelming, but steady, ancient, familiar. It rises from the same clay as the houses below, built by the same hands that knead dough, grind barley, and mend baskets at dawn. Between these monumental heights and the quiet alleys lies the true body of the city. Markets begin to stir around open squares. Bakers test their ovens, sending out the first warm scent of bread. A merchant rolls up a reed mat, brushing away dust before placing jars and cloth where customers will soon pass. A donkey lowers its head to a trough, its harness creaking softly. Children hurry along walls carrying small buckets of water, careful not to spill a drop. In certain corners, craftspeople live and work side by side. A row of workshops might fill an entire lane. Potters shaping clay on low wheels, reed workers weaving baskets, smiths tapping bronze with slow rhythm. Nothing here is rushed. Even the heat rising from kilns seems to move with the worker's breath. And among the city's quietest wonders are the rooftops. Flat, layered with beams, reed mats, and clay, they form a patchwork of terraces spread across Babylon's surface. Some hold cooling jars, some hold drying laundry, and some still keep the sleeping mats where families spent the night air's gentleness. At dawn, rooftops are cooler than the streets, and people climb up to stretch, to look at the sky, or simply to breathe before the heat settles in. And still, Babylon holds one more gentle truth. It is not only a human world. Dogs wander between doorways, cats wait near grain stores for the faint rustle of mice, pigeons settle along roof edges, donkeys blink patiently in the early sun. Their quiet presence softens the city, warming it in a way no tower or monument could. As the sun climbs, light pushes deeper into alleys. The city begins to warm. The first hints of heat rise from the walls, soft at first, then sharper. Shadows shorten, colors brighten. Dawn's gold becomes mid-morning's pale glow. People begin to move faster, though nothing in Babylon ever truly hurries. Life follows the sun, not the clock. And now the city stands fully awake. Alleys humming, squares stirring, rivers shining, rooftops warming. A calm, ancient confidence settles over everything, reminding us that Babylon was not only a legendary place, it was a living one. From here, the path narrows once more, leading us from the shape of the city to the quiet interior of a single home, to the courtyards, rooms, and rooftops where families spent most of their lives.
But there is one small truth we often forget. A Babylonian home was never built to impress the outside world. It was built to protect a small pocket of calm within a hot, crowded, endlessly breathing city. And yet, behind plain mudbrick walls, each home carried its own quiet universe. When you step inside, the first thing you notice is not decoration or furniture, it is the air. Outside, the city is already warming under the rising sun, but the moment you pass through the narrow doorway, the temperature drops. Thick mudbrick walls hold the night's coolness, releasing it slowly through the morning hours. The entrance is dim, lit only by a thin thread of light coming from deeper within. Street noise disappears almost completely, replaced by soft echoes moving from room to courtyard. Most homes begin with a small transitional space, a quiet buffer that separates the outside world from the living heart of the family. Here, jars of water stand near the wall. Baskets of reeds wait for use. Tools rest in corners with patient stillness. Sometimes sandals are left near the door, though many people walk barefoot inside. The cool earth floor feels soothing after the long heat of Babylonian summers. As you move further inward, the house opens suddenly into its center, the courtyard. This square of open sky is the true soul of the home. Sunlight falls here first, warming one wall while the opposite remains in shadow. Clay jars rest in the cool corners. Reed mats lean neatly against the wall. A small clay hearth, darkened from use, sits quietly in its place. Sometimes a few young plants grow in clay pots, their leaves trembling lightly in the rising breeze. The courtyard is not merely an open space. It is the well of light for the entire home, a place where air, sun, and life gather. Because most rooms have no external windows, they open inward instead, towards this bright square at the center. Families cross it constantly, to cook, to wash, to sort grain, to rest in the shade, to speak softly with one another. Even in Babylon's densest neighborhoods, the courtyard gives every family their own small piece of sky. Rooms surround this open heart, each shaped by the same materials, the same breath of air, the same gentle rhythm of daily life. One room holds storage jars, massive clay bins built directly into the floor, filled with grain that will feed the household through the year. Another room serves as a kitchen, its walls darkened from a small oven or clay hearth. Pottery sits on shelves molded from the mudbrick itself. A grinding stone rests in the corner, ready to crush barley into flour. And there is one detail that quietly ties the entire home together. Almost everything you see, floors, shelves, walls, beds, comes from the very earth beneath your feet. Clay shaped by hand, dried in the sun, or fired just enough to harden. This gives the home a softness, a muted, living presence. Surfaces feel warm when touched. They smell faintly of dust and river silt. They crumble slightly when scraped, reminding you that the house itself is a piece of the land. Furniture is minimal. People sit on reed mats or low wooden stools. They sleep on thick mats that roll up in the morning and return to the floor each night. Storage chests are small and practical. Tools, bowls, baskets, and textiles fill the home with gentle usefulness. A wealthier family might display painted plaster or a decorated wooden chest, but even then the feeling remains grounded and simple. In one corner, you may notice a surprising feature, a small room for washing or relieving oneself. Some homes had modest bathrooms, little more than a drain leading outward. They were tiny but practical, a quiet reminder of how deliberately Babylonian builders adapted to the heat, dust, and density of their world. As you walk, your footsteps make soft, rounded sounds. Clay floors produce a muted thud. Reed mats rustle. The scent of sesame oil drifts gently from the kitchen. If bread was baked recently, a warm aroma of crust and smoke lingers in the air. If lentils simmer on a pot, the smell is earthy and comforting. Voices echo lightly around the courtyard, never loud, for sound travels easily through mudbrick walls. Children speak quietly as they play with clay toys shaped like small animals. A woman hums while sorting grain. A man repairs a basket with slow, steady hands.
These overlapping sounds create a familiar, peaceful hum, but seems to rise from the house itself. But this calm interior holds another secret. Above you is the flat roof, not merely a cover, but another living space. Made from beams, reed mats, and thick plaster, it forms a sturdy terrace where families work, rest, and sleep during the hottest seasons. A narrow staircase or wooden ladder leads upward. Climbing it opens the world again. On the roof, the sky feels vast. Across the city, rooftops form a gentle mosaic, some with drying laundry, some with stored tools, some still holding mats where families slept through the cooler night. In summer, evenings on the roof are often the only respite from the stifling heat below. Families gather here to talk, to share food, to listen to the city's nighttime breath. A donkey braying somewhere far off, a night bird calling, the soft flicker of lamps in distant courtyards. When the heat becomes overwhelming, people bring their sleeping mats up here, resting beneath a sky filled with sharp, unbroken stars. In Babylon, the night is not silent, but it is open, broad, and comforting. Inside the home, life continues in slow, steady movements. A jar of fresh water is poured into a bowl. A mat is shaken gently free of dust. Children chase one another across shaded corridors, careful not to upset jars or bowls. Rooms stay cool until midday, when sunlight reaches deeper and warmth settles into the walls. From this quiet walk through rooms, courtyards, and rooftops, one understanding becomes clear. A Babylonian home was not built to outshine the city. It was built to shelter a family from heat, dust, noise, and constant activity, to create a small oasis of calm in the heart of a grand and ancient world. And from this peaceful center, daily life begins to unfold outward again, toward meals, work, routines, and the steady pulse of the city beyond. But there is one moment in Babylon that often goes unnoticed: the quiet breath between night and full morning, when the city is neither asleep nor awake. In this small gap, daily life begins to gather itself, like warm clay resting in gentle hands. And if we look just a little closer, we see that the rhythm of a Babylonian morning was never hurried. It unfolded slowly, shaped by heat, by light, and by centuries of patient habit. Morning in ancient Babylon begins before the sun fully clears the horizon. The sky holds a faint blue-gray tone, soft as river mist. The air is cool for a short, precious moment, especially for those who slept on rooftops to escape the trapped heat inside their walls. Mats rustle softly as people rise. Children blink at the pale light. Adults stretch quietly, preparing their shoulders and backs for the long hours that lie ahead. From rooftops and courtyards, the first gentle movements begin. A ladder creaks. Bare feet touch cool clay. Someone pours water into a shallow basin, the splash soft and familiar. Another person shakes a sleeping mat, letting a small cloud of dust drift upward before settling back into the earth, where it will be swept later. There is one sound that reveals the heart of Babylon's morning rhythm: the slow, steady grinding of barley. Stone against stone, a patient scrape that turns kernels into coarse flour. This sound echoes across courtyards throughout the city, a quiet announcement that breakfast has begun. For many families, this grinding is as natural as breath itself. As the stones turn, the warm smell of crushed grain rises into the air, earthy, faintly sweet. In another courtyard, lentils begin to stir in a clay pot. An oven warms slowly.
Thin smoke drifts upward through the roof opening, or through small gaps between beams. Most homes have no chimney, so the kitchen corner often grows hazy. Babylonians move within it calmly, as though working inside a gentle cloud. Children begin the day with small tasks. A boy carries water from a canal or from a large jar kept cool in the shade. He moves carefully. Clean water is precious. A girl gathers dried reeds for the hearth, sometimes tracing patterns in the dust with her finger before remembering the chore in her hands. Their slow, simple movements give the morning its soft pulse. Animals stir as well. A donkey tied in the courtyard stamps lightly. Chickens peck at crumbs left from the day before. A dog stretches, yawns, and settles at the doorway to watch the slow arrival of light. Their presence adds warmth to the home. Creatures and people sharing one compact world with overlapping rhythms. The courtyard brightens. Light spills over pale walls, turning clay surfaces into soft gold. It touches baskets, tools, jars, revealing the woven lines of reed mats, the cracked surface of old pottery, the smooth curve of a water bowl. For a brief moment, the light is gentle enough to enjoy. Soon, it will become sharp and demanding. Even in this soft hour, many tasks are already underway. Women knead dough, hands moving with practiced steadiness. They press barley flour and water together into thick, rounded shapes and place them inside the clay oven, sticking each piece to the hot interior wall. The smell of baking bread spreads through alleys and courtyards, warm, comforting, unmistakable. Men prepare tools, tying sandals, repairing a handle, checking ropes. Farmers think about fields and canals. Artisans think about unfinished orders or work left drying from the night before. Nothing is rushed. This is a calm readiness, a quiet understanding that the heat will grow strong soon enough. Breakfast arrives, though not as many imagine it. Most families eat something simple and nourishing. Flat barley bread dipped in sesame oil, a bowl of lentils, dates, onions, or yesterday's porridge softened with cool water. Thick, mildly fermented beer is part of nearly every morning meal. It is not a luxury, but a staple. Hydration and calories in a climate where clean water cannot always be trusted. Families sit quietly in courtyards or on rooftops, eating on reed mats. Children may eat first, or elders may be served softer foods or cooler water. Small gestures of respect shape these everyday rituals. And still the morning rhythm holds one more soft detail. Voices remain low, not out of sorrow, but out of understanding. Sound travels easily through mudbrick walls. A laugh in one courtyard becomes a whisper in the next. A spoken word stretches thin across the alley. Babylon wakes as a chorus of gentle sounds, never sharp ones. Now the city beyond the home begins to stir more clearly. Merchants open stalls, tools clicking softly against wood. Animals move toward markets and fields. River traffic increases, paddles tapping rhythmically on water. In some neighborhoods, the deep, steady beat of looms joins the air, a softly woven pulse. Inside the home, final preparations unfold. A woman sweeps the courtyard floor with a reed broom, guiding dust in slow circles. A man knots a cloth around his head to shield himself from the sun. A child gathers clay toys and tucks them neatly into a basket. Someone checks the water jars, feeling their cool, rounded sides to judge whether they will last through the heat ahead. Now the warmth begins to rise, slowly at first, like a warm breath rolling across the city. The coolness of dawn fades. Shadows shorten. The sun spills down the walls and onto the courtyard floor, sending everyone towards shade or into narrow alleys where the walls offer protection. Babylon is fully awake. From here, the morning stretches outwards, towards workshops, markets, fields, and temples, but its true beginning remains the home itself, the place where barley is ground, bread is baked, children learn their first tasks, and the day begins with soft, patient movement. And now, with the morning formed and unfolding, our path turns gently toward the hands of artisans and laborers, those who give shape and substance to Babylon's daily life.
But there is one quiet truth at the heart of Babylon. The city was not held together by kings or monuments, but by the steady hands of thousands of workers shaping clay, wood, metal, grain, and cloth every single day. And if we look just a little closer, we begin to see how the gentle repetition of labor created the soft, steady rhythm of the entire city. By the time the sun climbs high enough to wash away the coolness of dawn, Babylon is already humming with work, not loudly, never sharply, but with layered, patient sounds that feel almost like the city's own breathing. In courtyards, in shaded lanes, in open workshops and rooftop corners, hands begin to move, tools begin to tap, clay begins to turn. Each action small on its own, yet together forming the pulse that keeps Babylon alive. Let us walk slowly through this world. In a weaving lane, the first sound is a soft, rhythmic tapping as women beat looms to tighten threads. Their hands move with practiced certainty. Pull, lift, tap, adjust. Wool fibers stretch into long strands. Linen threads twist in patient harmony. The smell of raw wool floats through warm air, mingling with the dusty scent of clay walls. The weavers work calmly beside one another, each focused yet aware of the gentle rhythm all around them. The sound is soothing, almost hypnotic, a heartbeat woven into the morning. Nearby, a potter sits at a low wheel, shaping wet clay with fingers that know every curve and pressure by memory. The wheel turns slowly. Water glistens on spinning clay, catching the sunlight in tiny reflections. The potter leans forward, guiding the jar's walls upward, inch by inch, coaxing the form into life. When it is finished, he sets it aside on a wooden board, joining rows of vessels that will soon hold grain, oil, beer, or water. Each pot carries the quiet imprint of his hands. Further along the lane, the scent of charcoal thickens in the air. Bronzesmiths are already working, though their movements remain slow and controlled. A hammer taps lightly against heated metal, never harsh, always measured. Tiny sparks leap and fade. An apprentice works the bellows with steady breaths, feeding the fire just enough to shape the bronze. Bracelets, tools, arrowheads, pins, bowls, all emerge from these small glowing hearths, each object carrying the patience of its maker. And there is a moment here that reveals something essential. Most labor in Babylon is repetitive, but never rushed. Skill is learned through calm imitation, through years of watching and repeating. A father adjusts his son's grip. An older woman guides a young weaver's thread. A master lifts an apprentice's hand to show the perfect angle of a tool. Knowledge passes quietly from one pair of hands to another. A few steps away, bakers heat their domed clay ovens. Inside, the walls glow orange. Warmth pours into the alley.
They sweep out ash with reed brushes, then press rounds of dough onto the interior. The smell of baking bread rises almost instantly, smoky, warm, deeply comforting. Children passing by often slow their steps, hoping for a small piece from the first batch. The bakers work quickly, but gently, removing finished flatbread with a long hook and preparing space for the next. Closer to the river, boatmen mend nets and coil ropes. Their hands smell faintly of water and reeds. The river taps softly against the quays, a constant low percussion beneath their work. Boats rock gently as they are loaded with grain, timber, pottery, and baskets. Soon, they will glide along the Euphrates, bringing goods to markets or carrying them beyond the city. But for now, everything moves with slow morning patience. Near the market, a scribe sits cross-legged in the shade. A fresh clay tablet rests on his lap. With a reed stylus, he presses wedge-shaped marks into the soft surface. You can hear the faint, dry scrape of the stylus as he writes contracts, lists, and simple letters for people who cannot write themselves. When a tablet is filled, he sets it aside to dry in the sun and shapes a new one from smooth, cool clay. His entire world moves in quiet strokes. At the city gates, shepherds arrive with goats and sheep. Their cloaks carry descent of open fields and long walks through grazing lands. The animals bleat softly, noses lifted toward the smell of fresh bread and water. Buyers inspect wool and cheese. Transactions happen quietly, a nod, a gesture, a few words spoken softly beneath the rising sun. But one of the most invisible forms of labor takes place inside the home. A woman spins wool into thread, the spindle turning smoothly in her hands. Another patches a crack in the courtyard wall with soft clay. A girl sweeps dust from the rooftop before the wind can gather it into heaps. An older man repairs a sandal strap using reed fibers soaked in water. These small actions, barely noticed individually, maintain the life of the household day after day. What stands out most is not the variety of tasks, but the texture of them. Every craft, weaving, baking, pottery, carpentry, metalwork, has its own smell, its own sound, its own pace. These details shape Babylon more deeply than its walls or temples. As the sun grows hotter, turning alleys bright and sharp, these small worlds of labor continue, absorbing the heat and returning the city's calm, steady rhythm. And through all this work, a soft emotional warmth flows quietly. A potter smiles when a new jar dries without cracks. A weaver laughs as a child imitates her movements. A smith hums a tune as he taps metal into shape. Someone offers a cup of cool water to a tired neighbor. Children carry messages between workshops, proud to help. Small moments, tiny threads of kindness woven into the day. Now the heat has strengthened. Shadows retreat into corners. Workers move deeper into shade or hang reed mats to soften the sun. But the rhythm continues unchanged. Babylon's life depends on these hands, steady, patient, practiced. And from this gentle world of craft and labor, our path now drifts toward the markets, toward the warm heart of food, trade, voices, and the soft hum of Babylon's daily commerce.
But there's one more corner of Babylon where daily life reveals its softest rhythm, Though at first glance it may seem loud, crowded, and full of movement. But if you slow down, if you let the dust settle and listen beneath the noise, the market becomes something else entirely. A gentle pattern of gestures, scents, familiar voices, and patient hands moving through warm air. And if you look a little closer, you may notice one quiet truth. Nothing in this heat can be rushed. Morning reaches the market slowly. Before the sun climbs high enough to warm the plaster walls, a soft glow settles across the stalls. Reed mats are lifted, wooden shutters creak open. Clay jars are arranged in careful rows that catch the early golden light. Even the animals sense the rhythm of the day. Donkeys blink sleepily, shifting their weight as if searching for the coolest patch of ground. A vendor pats his animal's neck, murmuring something only the donkey seems to understand. Moments like this hold a gentle humor, the quiet companionship of humans and animals enduring the same heat, the same dust, the same pace. As the market awakes, its first sounds rise not as noise, but as layers of soft textures. The thump of a basket placed on a table, the swish of a broom pushing yesterday's dust aside, the muted clink of pottery as jars are lined up with practiced care. A woman brushes sesame seeds from a tray with slow, steady motions, as though her hands instinctively match the warm, unhurried air. Children help their parents in their own wandering way. One carries a basket of onions with great seriousness, until he suddenly forgets and begins tapping two stones together, lost in a small private world of morning play. The scents of the market thicken as more people arrive. Warm sesame oil flickers in small lamps. Fresh onions bring sharp earthiness. Piles of dates add sweetness to the air. Somewhere, barley beer is poured into a clay jar, releasing a faint sour tang. Bakers, awake long before the rest of the city, bring loaves still warm from their ovens. The smell of fresh bread drifts through the market like a soft invitation, wrapping itself gently around anyone passing by. A child lingers near the bread stall a little too long, hoping the vendor will notice and offer a small piece from the first batch. Merchants began calling out prices, but even their voices sound softened by the thick morning heat. No shouting, no frantic gestures, just a steady flow of speech shaped by routine. Bronze weights are lifted carefully, balanced against small piles of barley or fragments of silver. The movement has a quiet formality to it, almost a ceremony of trust. Sometimes a customer squints suspiciously at a scale. The merchant raises both hands with exaggerated innocence, as if saying, "This scale has been honest longer than I've been alive." The customer smiles, knowing perfectly well the scale was repaired just last month. Movement shapes the market as much as sound. Women weave through the alleys carrying jars that sway gently with each step. Young boys hurry past with bundles of herbs or reeds, though their urgency disappears the moment they see a friend and pause to share a small story. One boy, mid-delivery, suddenly dashes after a stray dog that stole a piece of bread. The dog trots away proudly, tail wagging in slow arcs. Even mischief follows a lazy rhythm here. Craftsmen settle into their familiar corners. A potter wets his hands and shapes smooth circles on spinning clay, each bowl forming under his fingers with quiet patience.
A metalworker sharpens a bronze blade, each stroke leaving a faint ringing sound that blends into the soft background of the market. Weavers sit in shaded pockets, their looms beating a slow, steady rhythm that feels almost like breath. These gentle sounds, woven together, become the heartbeat of the marketplace. Even small frustrations carry a tender softness. When a pot cracks unexpectedly, the potter sighs, lifts it with both hands, and mutters something under his breath. Not anger, just the calm acceptance of someone who understands that clay, like life, sometimes gives way. When a customer complains that the dates look smaller than last week, the merchant shrugs, spreading his palms in a gesture that says, "Speak to the trees, not to me." The customer eventually laughs and buys them anyway. Heat builds slowly through the morning. Golden light becomes white and sharp. Dust begins to shimmer in the warm air. People drift toward patches of shade beneath reed awnings. A few sit on low stools, resting their feet for a moment. An elderly man settles in his usual corner, letting the cool shadow fall across his face. He closes his eyes briefly, just long enough to pretend he was napping. Later, he will insist he was merely listening to the market breathe. Despite the growing heat, the market remains a place of comfort, a warm heart beating within the city. Here, social bonds are woven as steadily as threads on a loom. Neighbors greet each other with quiet familiarity. A father tests the sound of a clay rattle for his infant. A mother chooses herbs while her daughter twirls in circles, imagining herself performing at a festival. These small gestures create a sense of community, not inside homes alone, but across the entire city. By midday, the market shifts again. Some stalls close for rest, their owners settling in shade with slow, relaxed movements. Others remain open but quiet, allowing the heat to pass over them like a wave. The market never truly stops. It expands and softens, breathes in and out, following the gentle rhythm of those who gather there. And as the sounds begin to settle once more, the day guides us deeper into the heart of the city, toward kitchens, meals, and the warm shared rituals that shaped Babylonian home life. But there's one more corner of Babylon where daily life reveals its softest rhythm, though at first glance it may seem loud, crowded, and full of movement. But if you slow down, if you let the dust settle and listen beneath the noise, the market becomes something else entirely. A gentle pattern of gestures, scents, familiar voices, and patient hands moving through warm air. And if you look a little closer, you may notice one quiet truth. Nothing in this heat can be rushed. Morning reaches the market slowly. Before the sun climbs high enough to warm the plaster walls, a soft glow settles across the stalls. Reed mats are lifted, wooden shutters creak open. Clay jars are arranged in careful rows that catch the early golden light. Even the animals sense the rhythm of the day. Donkeys blink sleepily, shifting their weight as if searching for the coolest patch of ground. A vendor pats his animal's neck, murmuring something only the donkey seems to understand. Moments like this hold a gentle humor, the quiet companionship of humans and animals enduring the same heat, the same dust, the same pace. As the market awakes, its first sounds rise not as noise, but as layers of soft textures. The thump of a basket placed on a table, the the swish of a broom pushing yesterday's dust aside, the muted clink of pottery as jars are lined up with practiced care. A woman brushes sesame seeds from a tray with slow, steady motions, as though her hands instinctively match the warm, unhurried air. Children help their parents in their own wandering way. One carries a basket of onions with great seriousness, until he suddenly forgets and begins tapping two stones together, lost in a small private world of morning play. The scents of the market thicken as more people arrive. Warm sesame oil flickers in small lamps. Fresh onions bring sharp earthiness. Piles of dates add sweetness to the air. Somewhere, barley beer is poured into a clay jar, releasing a faint sour tang. Bakers, awake long before the rest of the city, bring loaves still warm from their ovens. The smell of fresh bread drifts through the market like a soft invitation, wrapping itself gently around anyone passing by. A child lingers near the bread stall a little too long, hoping the vendor will notice and offer a small piece from the first batch. Merchants began calling out prices, but even their voices sound softened by the thick morning heat. No shouting, no frantic gestures, just a steady flow of speech shaped by routine. Bronze weights are lifted carefully, balanced against small piles of barley or fragments of silver. The movement has a quiet formality to it, almost a ceremony of trust. Sometimes a customer squints suspiciously at a scale. The merchant raises both hands with exaggerated innocence, as if saying, "This scale has been honest longer than I've been alive." The customer smiles, knowing perfectly well the scale was repaired just last month. Movement shapes the market as much as sound. Women weave through the alleys carrying jars that sway gently with each step. Young boys hurry past with bundles of herbs or reeds, though their urgency disappears the moment they see a friend and pause to share a small story. One boy, mid-delivery, suddenly dashes after a stray dog that stole a piece of bread. The dog trots away proudly, tail wagging in slow arcs. Even mischief follows a lazy rhythm here. Craftsmen settle into their familiar corners. A potter wets his hands and shapes smooth circles on spinning clay, each bowl forming under his fingers with quiet patience. A metalworker sharpens a bronze blade, each stroke leaving a faint ringing sound that blends into the soft background of the market. Weavers sit in shaded pockets, their looms beating a slow, steady rhythm that feels almost like breath. These gentle sounds, woven together, become the heartbeat of the marketplace. Even small frustrations carry a tender softness. When a pot cracks unexpectedly, the potter sighs, lifts it with both hands, and mutters something under his breath. Not anger, just the calm acceptance of someone who understands that clay, like life, sometimes gives way. When a customer complains that the dates look smaller than last week, the merchant shrugs, spreading his palms in a gesture that says, "Speak to the trees, not to me." The customer eventually laughs and buys them anyway. Heat builds slowly through the morning. Golden light becomes white and sharp. Dust begins to shimmer in the warm air. People drift toward patches of shade beneath reed awnings. A few sit on low stools, resting their feet for a moment. An elderly man settles in his usual corner, letting the cool shadow fall across his face. He closes his eyes briefly, just long enough to pretend he was napping. Later, he will insist he was merely listening to the market breathe. Despite the growing heat, the market remains a place of comfort, a warm heart beating within the city. Here, social bonds are woven as steadily as threads on a loom. Neighbors greet each other with quiet familiarity. A father tests the sound of a clay rattle for his infant. A mother chooses herbs while her daughter twirls and circles, imagining herself performing at a festival. These small gestures create a sense of community, not inside homes alone, but across the entire city. By midday, the market shifts again. Some stalls close for rest, their owners settling in shade with slow, relaxed movements. Others remain open but quiet, allowing the heat to pass over them like a wave. The market never truly stops. It expands and softens, breathes in and out, following the gentle rhythm of those who gather there. And as the sounds begin to settle once more, the day guides us deeper into the heart of the city, toward kitchens, meals, and the warm shared rituals that shaped Babylonian home life.
There is one more layer of Babylonian life that only reveals itself when you step closer to the warmth of a kitchen. From a distance, Babylonian food might seem simple: bread, beer, dates, a few herbs. But if you pause and let the scents drift toward you, another truth appears. Babylonian cooking was quiet, steady, almost meditative, shaped not by abundance, but by rhythm, patience, and long familiarity with the land. And if you watch closely, you may catch a small moment of humor too. A pot that refuses to boil when a mother insists it must, or a child trying to steal a date from a jar and pretending innocence despite sticky fingers. Kitchens in Babylon were rarely separate rooms. Most lived in the corners of courtyards, half shaded by reed mats or low mud-brick walls. The air here held its own temperature, warm in the morning when ovens glowed, cooler in the afternoon when shadows stretched across the earthen floor. You might hear the soft clatter of a clay pot, the creak of a woven basket, or the faint hiss of sesame oil warming above the fire. These sounds blended naturally with the life of the house: a baby murmuring from a shaded corner, someone grinding barley at the threshold, a neighbor calling a greeting over the courtyard wall. Bread formed the heart of every meal, and its preparation shaped a slow, comforting rhythm. Barley was most common, though wheat appeared in wealthier homes. Women ground grain on stone saddles, leaning into each push of the grinding stone with the kind of steady patience learned from childhood. The movement created a deep, ancient rhythm, soft, repeated, almost like a heartbeat. Each stroke sent a warm cloud of flour drifting upward, catching morning sunlight in faint golden threads. Children watched with fascination, though they stood at a careful distance, knowing that stepping too close meant being told to sweep the entire courtyard. When the dough was ready, it was shaped into flat rounds and pressed against the glowing inner walls of clay ovens. These ovens, fed by dry reeds and scraps of wood, radiated a heat that felt almost alive. Bread baked quickly here. Its scent, warm, earthy, slightly sweet, slipped through doorways and alleys, drawing glances toward the oven even from those pretending not to notice. A gentle humor often lived in these moments. Someone tapping a loaf too early, just to check. A grandmother swearing she could measure baking time by the direction of the drifting smoke. Children trying to guess which loaf would taste the sweetest. Beside the bread, clay pots simmered slowly. Onions, garlic, lentils, and beans blended into thick stews, flavored with coriander, cumin, mustard, or leeks. Salt, precious and rationed, was added with careful fingers.
These pots simmered for hours, softening ingredients until they settled into a deep, earthy richness. People lifted the lids often, not because anything had changed, but because the rising steam felt like reassurance. Dates brought sweetness to everyday meals. Fresh dates, warm from the sun, piled high in woven baskets. Dried dates rested in shadowed storage corners. Thick date syrup simmered in clay jars, its scent drifting through the air like burnt honey. Children adored it most. Adults usually pretended not to notice when small hands reached silently toward the jar, silence being always the most suspicious of all sounds. Beer formed another foundation of daily nourishment. Thick, slightly sour, cloudy with grain, it was more food than drink, brewed in large vats that gave the courtyard a warm, earthy smell. People sipped it through long straws to avoid the grain husks floating at the surface. In the heat of midday, beer jugs stood beside clay water jars, both essential to surviving long hours beneath the sun. Sometimes neighbors shared a jar with a soft smile, a brief moment of comfort tucked between long stretches of work. Fish added variety where the river allowed. The canals and the Euphrates offered carp, catfish, eels, and turtles. Fishermen returned home dripping river water along the alleys, nets heavy with their catch. Fresh fish carried a sharp, clean scent. Families grilled them on simple clay stands or simmered them in stews with herbs. Cats appeared instantly, as if summoned by the very thought of fish, creeping closer with exaggerated innocence until someone gently waved them away. And always, at least once a day, a cat pretended disinterest right before swiping a fishtail the moment a back was turned. Meat was less common, usually reserved for offerings or festivals. Sheep and goats were the most frequent, and when their meat roasted in courtyards, the aroma drifted far along the alleys, drawing quiet curiosity from neighbors. Dairy, cheese, butter, sour milk appeared in small amounts and was used quickly before heat spoiled it. Kitchens were places of constant yet unhurried motion. Someone stirred a pot, someone lifted a jar, someone sifted grain or washed herbs under a thin stream of water. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. A young girl might learn to knead dough by resting her hands atop her mother's, feeling the patient pressure of each movement. An older child might help repair a cracked jar, pressing wet clay along the fracture line with quiet concentration. Even the tools of Babylonian kitchens held stories. Reed baskets softened from years of work, clay jars polished smooth by countless hands, wooden spoons darkened from oil and time. A chipped bowl kept not for its usefulness, but because it once belonged to a grandmother. These objects shaped the rhythm of meals as much as the ingredients themselves. Families gathered to eat in close circles. Bread was torn by hand. Stews were shared from common bowls. Beer jars were passed gently between family members. Conversation flowed softly. Updates from neighbors, small worries, quiet jokes about stubborn animals or the rising heat. Meals were rarely silent, but they were always gentle. When supper ended, the kitchen slowly returned to stillness. Pots were rinsed, ovens raked clean. Leftover embers glowed faintly as night pressed in. A cool jar of water was placed in the shade for morning. These quiet routines, repeated day after day, formed the warm, nourishing heart of Babylonian life. And from this gentle world of cooking fires, shared meals, and the soft voices of families gathering in courtyards, our path turns naturally toward the people themselves, toward the bonds, emotions, and daily interactions that shaped the rhythm of Babylonian home life.
There is a gentle truth we often forget when imagining a city as grand as Babylon. Behind its monumental walls, its palaces, its markets, and its temples, most of life unfolded quietly within families. Beneath the noise of the city lived a softer world, a world shaped by routine, affection, shared labor, and the warmth of daily connection.
And if you watch closely, you may notice something else too. Moments of humor, tenderness, and small joys that made Babylonian households feel whole. A Babylonian family was rarely just a small group. Many homes held parents, children, elderly relatives, married sons with their wives, unmarried daughters, servants, and sometimes slaves. Everyone lived under one roof or within a cluster of rooms grouped around a single courtyard. This closeness created a natural harmony, a gentle weaving of lives that moved from dawn to dusk with a soft, familiar rhythm. In the early coolness of morning, you might hear the quiet murmur of mothers waking children, the scrape of reed sandals across packed earth, or the gentle splash of water poured into jars for the day ahead. Nothing hurried, nothing loud, just the slow unfolding of another day. Inside these homes, roles were flexible, yet deeply understood. Fathers often served as the legal and spiritual heads of the household, but the steady rhythm of daily life usually rested in the hands of women. They managed grain stores, prepared food, wove cloth, arranged marriages, and carried the emotional balance of the home. Occasionally, someone grumbled about chores or teased a sibling for laziness, but such frictions softened quickly, dissolving back into the calm of routine. Children brought movement and brightness to the household. Their laughter floated through courtyards, lightening even the warmest afternoons. Young children wandered barefoot, carrying clay toys shaped like tiny animals or spinning little tops across the floor. Clay rattles filled with pebbles made a soft, cheerful music whenever a toddler waved one proudly. Sometimes a child chased away a pigeon from the grain jar, only for the bird to return moments later, beginning the same harmless game again. Older children learned responsibility early. Boys carried heavy water jars from canals, walking slowly and proudly, hoping for praise when they arrived home with only a little water spilled. Girls practiced spinning and weaving, their small fingers fumbling at first, then slowly finding rhythm and confidence. A mother might smile as her daughter tangled the yarn again, pretending not to notice the frustration growing on the girl's face. Later, when the knot was finally undone, both would laugh softly at the victory. Education varied, but even outside scribal schools, families taught their children practical wisdom: how to grind barley, how to shape dough, how to mend reed mats, how to understand omens in daily life. Parents explained dreams, pointed out the meaning of a sudden wind, or shared why the barking of a dog was sometimes seen as a warning. These lessons were offered gently, woven into stories and examples rather than strict commands. Often a humorous note slipped in, an uncle describing how he once ignored an omen and regretted it, or a grandmother insisting she could read a goat's mood better than any astrologer. Affection inside the home appeared not in grand gestures, but in quiet, steady acts. A father adjusting a child's sandals before they walked to the market, a mother brushing dust from her son's hair after he returned from the canal, a teenager pretending reluctance when asked to help, yet smiling softly as he does it anyway. An older sister giving her younger sibling a drop of date syrup when she thought no one was watching. These small gestures stitched the household together like threads in a woven cloth. Marriage formed another important part of family life. Most marriages were arranged, but affection often grew slowly, naturally, shaped by shared meals, shared duties, and quiet moments. A shy bride entering her new home might laugh later that day when a goat tried to nibble the hem of her wedding dress. A nervous groom might check the courtyard twice before greeting his new relatives. Clay tablets carried the legal weight of these unions, but the emotional reality unfolded through daily life. Women held more influence than legal texts alone suggest. Some managed property,
Some sold goods in the market. Some ran weaving workshops or oversaw large households. A widow might manage a home with calm confidence, shaped by decades of experience. And though fathers held formal authority, many decisions were settled in the courtyard through quiet conversations among mothers, sisters, and aunts. Voices steady, practical, and deeply respected. Elders carried memory. Their stories preserved the past. Tales of kings, droughts, old disputes, family ancestors, and forgotten rituals. In the evening, as lamps glowed softly, grandparents told stories in slow, warm voices. A child leaning against an elder's knee might fall asleep mid-sentence, breathing softly as the story continued around them. Meals reflected these family bonds. People gathered closely, sharing bowls instead of dividing plates. Grandmother somehow knew which child wanted an extra piece of bread before they spoke. The youngest reached into bowls too eagerly, pulling back with wide eyes when the stew was hotter than expected. Soft laughter rose and blended with the aroma of lentils and baking bread. Even small disagreements loosened and faded during meals, smoothed by warm food and the comfort of company. Babylonian families faced hardships too: illness, heat, debts, crop failures, and disputes. But even in difficulty, the household often moved like a single, steady body. A sick child drew everyone's care. A shortage of grain meant sharing more carefully. A fight between siblings usually ended with a gentle scolding from an elder and a quiet reconciliation soon after. The emotional tone of Babylonian households was never loud or dramatic. It lived in soft gestures, in steady routines, in familiar voices echoing gently through courtyards and rooms. Beneath the city's grandeur, these homes formed its true heartbeat, and from this intimate world of family bonds and childhood rhythms, life naturally expands outward toward the fields, herds, and open landscapes that nourished every household in the heart of Babylon.
There is a quiet truth waiting just outside Babylon's walls. If you walk beyond the crowded streets and follow the soft curve of the land, the city gradually loosens behind you. The calls of merchants fade. The footsteps of donkeys dissolve. What remains is wind moving across open fields and the slow, steady breath of canal water against muddy banks. And if you pause long enough, you begin to feel something deeper, the ancient rhythm that shaped not only food and work, but the identity of nearly every Babylonian family. The fields begin only a short walk from the city's last mudbrick houses. Soon the ground darkens and softens beneath your feet, carrying the damp scent of silt and warm earth. Barley shoots rise in long, patient rows, trembling gently whenever the breeze shifts. Farmers walk barefoot between them, their feet sinking slightly into the moist soil. With a single step, they can sense more about the land than any written record could ever tell. The irrigation canals stretch across the plain like quiet veins of the earth. They carry water slowly, confidently, guided by channels carved long ago and repaired year after year when the floods retreat. Before the sun strengthens, farmers gather at canal gates to adjust wooden shutters that decide which field receives water next. Sometimes they argue lightly about whose turn it is, but even these disagreements feel softened by the constant murmur of flowing water. Everyone knows the canals belong to all. A well-maintained canal feeds every household, while a neglected one can break a season. As the sun rises higher, the light grows white and sharp. Heat settles over the plain like an invisible weight. The earth releases a warm, dusty smell that deepens with every passing hour. Farmers wrap cloth around their heads and shoulders. A donkey, tied to a sledge of reeds, flicks its ears at persistent flies. And nearby, a young boy, tasked with chasing birds from the fields, waves his arms dramatically at a flock of stubborn pigeons. They scatter for a moment, only to land again behind him when he turns away. It is one of the small, predictable battles of rural life.
Closer to the canal, children crouch at the water's edge, trying to catch fish or turtles with their hands. Their reflections shimmer, bending with each ripple. A mother working nearby pretends not to notice when her child splashes a little too eagerly. Moments later, she calls them into the shade and offers a small piece of date to quiet their excitement. These gentle interruptions soften the long hours of labor, giving the fields a human warmth. Barley, the heartbeat of Babylon's diet, grows steadily under the sun. Farmers inspect each row with careful eyes. They know the healthy hue of grain, the early signs of disease, the look of soil that needs rest. When harvest time finally arrives, the fields shift into wide golden seas. Workers move through them with rhythmic motions, cutting stalks with curved sickles that whisper with every swing. Dust rises in soft clouds. Donkeys wait patiently beside growing piles of stalks, their tails swaying lazily in the heat. Threshing brings a different rhythm. On open floors of hardened earth, donkeys or oxen drag weighted sledges over the barley, breaking stalks and releasing the kernels. Children run ahead to gather stray bundles, their faces bright with pride. A father might laugh softly when a small child tries to lift a bundle twice their size and topples gently into the dust. He hands them a smaller one, and the work continues with a shared smile. Agriculture demanded strength, but it required attention and intuition just as deeply. Farmers read the sky the way scribes read tablets. A red morning warned of dust storms. A pale, washed-out dawn promised calm. Older farmers taught younger ones these signs quietly, through stories, through gestures, through the simple weight of experience. If the wind smells of river mud tonight, an elder might say, prepare for rain. And the younger farmer nods, pretending he already knew. Animals shaped the land as much as people did. Sheep and goats grazed on fallow fields, their bells creating soft, uneven music across the plain. Geese parted yardworks with loud indignation, sometimes sounding the alarm at nothing more threatening than a passing lizard. Cows and oxen plowed long, graceful furrows, their slow steps carving steady lines in the earth. Work paused at midday, when the heat grew too heavy for even the most seasoned farmers. People gathered under tamarisk trees, sharing bread, onions, dates, and cool water from clay jars. This rest felt almost sacred, a moment when muscles loosened, sweat dried, and the world seemed to quiet itself in sympathy. Even the donkeys relaxed into shade, eyes half closed, tails swaying slowly. Rural life held risks too. Floods could erase months of effort in a single night. A broken canal gate could drain precious water. Some fields turned white with creeping salt, a slow disaster farmers feared more than drought. Yet the land also offered resilience. The rivers renewed the soil with fresh silt each year. Farmers trusted this cycle just as they trusted one another. As evening approached, workers walked home carrying dust on their clothes and a warm, familiar fatigue in their limbs. The sky softened into rose and orange. A shepherd returned with goats, counting them softly under his breath. Children ran ahead toward the glow of home. The canals reflected the fading light, and the fields settled into cool, gentle stillness. Babylon is often remembered for its towers, walls, and palaces, the marvels that captured distant imaginations, but its true pulse lived here, among barley fields, quiet canals, bare feet in soft earth, and the ancient rhythm of water shaping life. And from this quiet landscape, the path slowly leads us back toward the city, toward the towering temples, the rituals, and the sacred heart of Babylon's spiritual world.
But this is where the story takes a turn toward the inner heart of Babylon. As you leave the open fields and walk back toward Babylon's heart, the landscape rises around you. Dusty paths turning into wider streets, low houses giving way to taller walls, and far ahead, the silhouettes of temples lifting gently into the sky. even from a distance, they feel different from the rest of the city. Their shapes are geometric, calm and steady. Baked brick glowing softly under the sun, as though warmed by centuries of prayers. These were not only places of worship, they were anchors of daily life, steadying people's emotions, routines, and hopes. Babylon may have lived through trade and fields, but it breathed through its rituals. And if you step a little closer, you can feel how deeply spiritual craftsmanship shaped the city's rhythm. The temples were built with a sense of permanence. Their walls stood thicker than those of any home. Their courtyards opened wider. Their foundations felt heavier beneath the feet. Yet inside, they did not overwhelm. They calmed. At the entrance, incense curled upward in slow, wandering spirals, leaving a sweet, resinous scent that lingered in the warm air. Outside, you hear donkeys, merchants, and distant chatter. Inside, those sounds disappear. The world narrows to soft footsteps, murmured prayers, the faint ring of a metal tool touched gently against stone. In Babylon, the divine was not distant. The gods were imagined as living beings, with preferences, moods, and needs. Marduk, the chief god of the city, was believed to reside symbolically within Esagila, his great temple. Above it rose the ziggurat Etamananki, the foundation of heaven and earth, stacked in vast levels like a stairway to the sky. People rarely climbed it, but its presence alone brought comfort. It stood like a cosmic pillar, a reminder that order could be restored even when life felt uncertain. Each morning, temple rituals unfolded with gentle precision. Priests washed the statues of the gods with scented water, dried them with soft cloth, and dressed them in fresh garments. These statues were not symbols, they were invited vessels of divine presence. On offering tables, bread, dates, beer, and meat were placed with careful hands. Lamps were lit one by one, their sesame oil releasing a quiet, steady hiss. These rituals had been practiced for centuries, and performing them correctly was believed to keep the world in balance. But the spiritual world did not belong only to priests. Ordinary people carried faith differently, in small actions, whispered prayers, and tokens placed quietly at shrines. A mother might offer a handful of barley and murmur a request for her child's health. A merchant could bow before a journey, asking Nabu to keep his contracts honest and his steps guided. Families kept protective amulets shaped like lions or fish, believing they guarded corners and doorways where unseen spirits might slip inside. Ishtar, radiant and fierce, was one of the most beloved deities. She held love, beauty, power, and war in her hands. Her festivals filled temples with music, flowers, and incense. During processions, her statue was carried through the city, and crowds gathered along the streets, hoping for a moment of her attention. Some joked softly that Ishtar helped, but only in her own way, like a strong-willed aunt whose advice arrives exactly when you're not expecting it. Shamash, the sun god and protector of justice, guided those seeking fairness. Disputes, court matters, or difficult choices often began with a glance toward the rising sun. A father settling an argument might lift his hands for a brief, sincere moment, hoping the God who sees all would help him judge wisely. Dreams, too, carried weight.
A troubling dream could send someone to a temple or a dream interpreter seeking clarity hidden within images. Overflowing water might mean abundance or danger. A lion could suggest courage or conflict. Though scholars wrote formal interpretations, most people relied on elders. A grandmother soothing a frightened child might whisper, "If birds flew upward in your dream, the gods are lifting your worries too." Whether accurate or not, the comfort mattered. Temples were not only spiritual centers, they were also practical workplaces. Large temple estates supported farmers, weavers, brewers, and scribes. People who never performed rituals themselves still helped sustain the temple's life. Women delivered freshly woven cloth for offerings. Men unloaded barley sacks from donkeys. Scribes recorded transactions that supported both the temple and the poor. The line between sacred and everyday life was soft, porous, constantly blending. Inside the courtyards, the coolness of stone underfoot felt rare and soothing. You might hear the soft echo of a priest passing, a basket of incense resting in his arms. Somewhere deeper in the temple, a drum sounded, slow, heavy, marking the beginning of a ritual that might last all morning. Light shifted across the walls of baked brick, turning the entire space into a still, glowing chamber that felt slightly removed from time. Rituals brought comfort, not because they solved problems instantly, but because they repeated patterns people trusted with their whole hearts. In a world shaped by floods, droughts, sickness, and uncertainty, rituals created continuity, a sense that humanity walked alongside something ancient and steady. And yet faith lived just as strongly in small domestic gestures. A mother tracing a blessing over her child. A farmer touching the trunk of a palm tree before harvest. A young man tying a protective bead around his wrist. Silent moments, soft motions, woven seamlessly into everyday life. As we leave the temple district and walk deeper into the city, another layer of Babylon begins to reveal itself. A world of signs, omens, dreams, and the unseen forces people believed moved in the night. The spiritual craft of Babylon did not end at the temple door. It followed people home. And there, in those quiet thresholds, the unseen world whispered its own ancient language.
There is a moment in Babylon when the day loosens its grip and the night begins to settle gently over rooftops and courtyards. The heat softens, shadows lengthen, the scent of sesame oil and river mud drifts slowly through narrow streets. This is the hour when people turn inward, toward memory, toward rest, and toward the unseen world that awakens only after dusk. And if you watch closely, you will notice a quiet truth. Night in Babylon was never empty. It was a realm filled with meaning, with symbols, with dreams that felt less like imagination and more like soft messages carried from beyond. Babylonians believed that sleep opened doors that daylight kept closed. Dreams were not random. They were woven with intention, sent by gods, ancestors, or wandering spirits who used images instead of voices. If a man dreamed of rising water, he might wake with a knot in his chest, wondering whether it warned of danger or simply reflected his own worries. If a child dreamed of a lion, comfort came only if the lion walked beside them calmly. A roaring lion meant something else entirely. The boundary between dream and omen was delicate, as thin as a reed shadow on a mudbrick wall. clay tablets preserved long lists of interpretations. If you dream of a falling star, expect news. If you dream of breaking a jar, prepare for conflict. If a door closes by itself, change is coming. To us, these lines may seem strange, but to Babylonians, they formed a map of the invisible, a way to read the hidden currents shaping their lives. When a dream felt especially heavy, people visited interpreters the next morning. These were not sorcerers in dramatic clothing. They were priests, scholars, or elders who knew the ancient signs by heart. A woman might describe birds circling above her roof. The interpreter would nod, reminding her that birds often signaled messages or journeys. The process was quiet, steady, offering reassurance in a world where so much depended on forces no one could see. Magic, too, lived within these nights, but never as thunder or spectacle. It was practical, gentle, and woven into daily habits. A small clay lion might be buried beneath a threshold to guard a household from illness. A carved fish amulet could hang near a child's sleeping mat to keep wandering spirits at bay. People did not expect miracles. They expected comfort, a soft reminder that protection could be invited, even in a world filled with uncertainties. Many homes kept small ritual bundles in the corners of rooms, knotted reeds, tiny beads, simple impressions pressed into clay. Corners were spiritually sensitive places, spots where shadows deepened and where the boundaries between human space and the unseen felt thinner. Before sleeping, someone might whisper the names of protective gods, Ea, Marduk, or Gula, letting the sounds settle into the air like a soft shield around the household. These gestures were quiet, private, and deeply human. The figure of the Ashipu, the ritual specialist, held an important place in Babylonian life. Part healer, part magician, part priest, the Ashipu carried knowledge older than the city itself. Their tools were simple: clay bowls, water, herbs, a stylus, carved figurines, but their presence brought calm. When someone fell ill or felt touched by misfortune, the Ashipu entered the home with slow, deliberate steps. He sprinkled water at the threshold, lit incense that curled upward like a living thread, and whispered formulas shaped by centuries. These rituals soothed not only the sick, but everyone watching. Even children, hiding behind their mother's clothing, felt the spell of safety settling over the home. Some beliefs may seem unusual today: a cold wind at night signaling a demon passing by, a flickering lamp hinting at a spirit, a dog's howl warning of unseen danger. Yet these interpretations gave shape to fear, turning it into something familiar and therefore bearable. Magic was also emotional work. When someone felt overwhelmed by grief or worry, they might write a name or symbol in clay and dissolve it in water, a small ritual that carried the weight away. Others tied knots in threads while whispering quiet pleas to the gods, believing the knots held their fears in place. These were not dramatic acts. They were gentle, reflective, anchored in love and the desire for protection. Children learned these traditions slowly, simply by watching. They saw adults trace protective marks in the dust before entering a house. They saw a grandmother place a bowl of water beneath a sleeping infant to catch bad dreams before they reached the child. Often, children made their own amulets, shaping tiny lions or stars from clay. Their creations rarely followed the proper rules: a lion with a crooked tail, a star with uneven points. But their efforts brought laughter, softening the house's tension.
Night was the most spiritually sensitive hour in Babylon. Rooftops filled with families lying under open sky, the air warm and thick, the city finally exhaling after a long, hot day. People listened to distant sounds, the splash of a fish in the Euphrates, the hollow clack of a guard's wooden signal, the whisper of wind brushing across reed mats. These small sounds shaped their understanding of the world. The night felt inhabited, layered, alive. And when families finally drifted into sleep, their dreams carried them through landscapes made of symbols, memories, and messages they would interpret at dawn. Babylonian nights were not simply hours of rest. They were journeys, quiet, wandering voyages into the deeper parts of the mind. And from this world of dreams and whispers, another layer of Babylonian life now begins to appear. The fragile reality of the human body, how people understood illness, how they healed, and how they faced the hardships woven through their days.
But there is one quiet truth about ancient Babylon that reveals itself only when night settles over the city. For all its grandeur, it was a place where illness walked beside people every day. Dust drifted through warm courtyards, canal water carried hidden dangers, and families slept in close, crowded rooms where sickness could move easily from one person to another. And yet, Babylonians did not greet illness with fear alone. They answered it with steady hands, inherited knowledge, and rituals shaped by centuries of careful observation. Babylonian medicine was a tapestry woven from two threads, the practical and the spiritual, so tightly intertwined that separating them would have felt unnatural. A woman suffering from fever might chew bitter herbs prepared by a household healer, while nearby a ritual specialist whispered a calming incantation. A man with a deep cut might feel honey spread across the wound, a treatment surprisingly effective, as a priest sprinkled blessed water over him in soft, deliberate motions. No one questioned whether these approaches contradicted each other. To the people of Babylon, healing worked best when body and spirit were tended together. Physicians, the Asu, were skilled observers of the physical world. They studied skin color, listened to breathing, examined swelling, and felt temperature with the back of the hand. They knew which herbs cooled a fever, mint, willow, and certain sharp-tasting leaves, and which soothed the stomach after a long day in the heat. Their tools were simple: bronze knives for cleaning wounds, reed tubes for giving medicines, linen for bandages, and clay bowls for mixing salves made from resins, oils, and crushed plants. What made their work powerful was not the equipment, but the knowledge passed silently from generation to generation. The Ashipu, the ritual specialist, approached illness differently. For them, disease signaled a disturbance in the unseen, a spirit unsettled, a protective force weakened, a curse fallen upon a household. Their healing involved incense, water, murmured prayers, carved figurines, and symbols traced gently in the air. To a modern mind, these acts might appear separate from medicine, but to a Babylonian, they eased fear, and a calm mind was considered essential to recovery. Many common ailments came from the environment itself. Dust storms irritated eyes and lungs, warm canal water carried parasites, heat exhausted workers long before midday. Even when people bathed, water was precious and not always clean. Still, families practiced their own kind of everyday hygiene, washing hands and feet before meals, rinsing faces at dawn, oiling skin to prevent cracking, brushing dust from clothing, combing hair to remove insects. Small habits, repeated quietly, softened the harshness of their world.
Eye ailments troubled nearly everyone. Sun glare and swirling dust left eyes red and sore. To protect themselves, people used kohl, dark mineral pigment that reduced glare and shielded delicate skin. They applied salves of oil, crushed dates, or herbs, treatments that varied by household but offered gentle relief. When irritation grew severe, the person sat in deep shade, letting cool mudbrick walls ease the strain. Fevers brought the most worry. Without thermometers, families read signs in the warmth of a child's skin, the heaviness of limbs, or the sudden loss of appetite. Mothers stayed awake through entire nights, stroking hair, whispering prayers, offering sips of water flavored with mint or sweetened with crushed dates. Fathers walked to healers at dawn for remedies, herbal mixtures stirred in clay jars, or honey to soothe raw throats and seal wounds. Sometimes these treatments worked, sometimes they did not. Babylonian families lived with uncertainty, meeting it not with despair, but with quiet perseverance. Injuries were common too. Farmers lifting heavy irrigation tools, builders dragging bricks, or workers slipping on dusty paths, all risked broken bones or sprains. When this happened, neighbors gathered with calm cooperation. Wooden splints were fashioned, linen strips wrapped with practiced hands, and the injured person carried to a shaded room where recovery moved at the slow pace of bone and time. Some illnesses were understood through a spiritual lens. A child waking from a nightmare could be considered vulnerable to wandering spirits. Parents placed amulets, tiny lions, birds, or fish, beside the sleeping mat to protect the child through the night. A fever accompanied by strange dreams might prompt a family to call an ashipu, seeking balance through ritual as much as through herbal care. Temples played an important role in healing. Priests preserved knowledge on clay tablets, describing symptoms and remedies with surprising detail, patterns of fever, signs of seizures, changes in appetite or mood. Even mental distress was recorded. People avoiding sunlight, losing their desire to eat, crying without cause. Though often attributed to spirits or omens, these descriptions show a deep compassion for emotional suffering. Most care, however, took place within the family. When someone fell ill, chores shifted naturally to siblings, cousins, and neighbors. A pot of lentils simmered quietly, water was carried in fresh jars, shade mats were lowered. The sick person was rarely left alone. Companionship itself became a form of medicine. Simple herbs filled household remedies, bitter leaves for the stomach, crushed plants for insect bites, warm oils for tight muscles, steam from clay pots to ease heavy breathing. These treatments did not promise miracles, but they made life gentler, and in Babylon, gentleness mattered. Despite this knowledge, death visited families often. Flood seasons brought sickness, heat waves drained strength, epidemics spread through crowded neighborhoods. Yet even in grief, Babylonian households held together with quiet solidarity. They gathered by lamps, whispered prayers, and shared burdens without complaint. When night deepened, families offered one last blessing for health before extinguishing their lamps. They hoped for a quiet dream, for rest that would rebuild strength, for the protection of gods watching from the dark. And as illness, healing, and hope intertwined in the stillness of the night, Babylon prepared for its evening transformation. When the city glowed with lamps, when workers returned home, and when life settled gently into the soft peace of sunset.
There is one gentle truth about ancient Babylon that reveals itself only when the sun begins to fall. The city did not simply grow dark. It softened, breathed, and changed shape, as though preparing itself for a quieter world. Evening in Babylon unfolded slowly, almost cautiously. After the long, heavy brightness of the day, the light shifted from gold to amber,
and then into a calm, muted dusk. Shadows stretched across rooftops and courtyards, lengthening inch by inch until the entire city seemed wrapped in a warm, fading glow. Babylon did not fall silent. It simply changed rhythm. As daylight weakened, people finished their last tasks with steady, familiar motions. Bakers brushed cool ash from their ovens, preparing them for the next morning. Weavers hung newly finished cloth along courtyard beams where the air still held a trace of heat. Shopkeepers closed shutters with slow, practiced hands. Farmers returning from fields rinsed dust from their feet at doorways, leaving small patterns of dried mud behind them. And throughout the city, families gathered again after hours spent apart. Evening was the hour when Babylon felt complete. But there is one detail we rarely notice. Even in the busiest neighborhoods, sunset brought an unexpected gentleness. Streets that felt wide and exposed at midday now seemed narrower, wrapped in shade. Heat lifted layer by layer, making space for a faint breeze to thread its way through alleys. Lamps appeared one by one, small clay bowls filled with sesame oil, their flames flickering softly. Wealthier homes placed lamps in bronze stands that cast patterned shadows, while simpler houses set them directly on packed earth floors. Their warm light settled into cracks of walls and corners of courtyards, turning the entire city into a patchwork of glowing islands. Evening meals shaped the emotional landscape of Babylon. The air filled with drifting scents, onions sizzling in oil, lentils simmering slowly, fresh bread warming hands. Families gathered around shared bowls, seated closely on reed mats. Voices lowered naturally, becoming gentle currents of conversation. How much grain was ground that day, how a child learned a new trick, how the sheep behaved near the canal. Nothing dramatic, nothing hurried, just the quiet warmth of being together. Children, renewed by cooling air, often played again as dusk fell. They chased each other across rooftops, tapped clay jars to mimic drums, rolled clay balls between their hands, or watched pigeons gliding down to settle on the edges of neighboring homes. Their laughter rose lightly into the evening, making the city feel less like a sprawling metropolis and more like a collection of close-knit households. Inside homes, tomorrow's preparations began. Women cleaned ovens, collecting embers for morning fire. Men checked sandals, repaired tools, or tied bundles for the next day. Elders sat near doorways, enjoying the cooling air and greeting neighbors with short, familiar phrases exchanged across narrow lanes. From rooftop to rooftop, people sometimes shared leftovers or news. A cousin visiting next week, a merchant returning from a distant town, a friend recovering from illness. These small threads connected households in ways that felt both simple and comforting. As dusk deepened, the city's monumental structures changed character. The great walls, bright and commanding under the sun, now glowed in muted tones. The ziggurat rose like a dark silhouette against the slowly darkening sky, its upper levels catching the last hints of reflected light. Temples prepared for evening rituals, lamps lit in inner chambers, incense drifting upward in thin spirals, priests walking with soft, deliberate steps. Even for those who never entered these sacred spaces, their presence gave sunset a quiet sense of order. And yet the night quietly hid one more layer. As lamps multiplied, shadows deepened. Alleys that felt familiar by day became ambiguous, their edges softened by darkness. Only pools of lamplight marked doorways and courtyards, leaving long stretches of quiet shade between them. Dogs wandered slowly through streets, sniffing corners, stepping into warm patches left by the day's sun. Their steady presence offered both comfort and warning, animals who sensed what humans might overlook. Night watchmen began their rounds. At intervals, they tapped wooden sticks or shook rattles, their rhythmic signals drifting through still air. For families lying awake on rooftops, these sounds were as reassuring as a heartbeat. evidence that the city was watched and therefore safe. Many homes place small protective charms near doors at this hour. Clay figures, inscribed tablets, or tight bundles meant to guard against wandering spirits. These gestures were quiet and private, part of the ordinary routine of preparing the household for night. Courtyards glowed gently as lamps flickered across reed mats and clay jars. Families shared short evening rituals, a whispered prayer, a tiny offering of grain or beer, a hopeful request for peaceful dreams. Spirituality in Babylon was woven into the softest moments of daily life, and evening was one of its most natural settings. Some nights carried music. A neighbor plucked a stringed instrument on the rooftop. Someone returning from a tavern hummed a familiar tune. These quiet notes drifted across the city like threads of sound, joining the distant murmur of the river and the soft crackle of lamps. As families prepared for sleep, homes shifted again. Mats were unrolled across floors or lifted onto rooftops. Water jars were refilled for morning. Children who napped earlier now curled against parents or siblings, their bodies relaxing into night's gentle coolness. The river played its own role in this city's transition. The Euphrates reflected the last colors of dusk before turning a deep, polished blue. Boatmen tied vessels securely, wood creaking softly as ropes tightened. In houses near the river, families fell asleep to the quiet lap of water against stone. By late evening, Babylon's noise faded into scattered murmurs. Lamps burned low, heat loosened its grip. The city settled into a peaceful stillness that touched every district, from humble workshops to grand palaces. And in this softened darkness, Babylon prepared for the deeper rhythm of night, a time of dreams, omens, wandering spirits, and families sleeping beneath the slow, steady sweep of stars.
As night deepened over ancient Babylon, the city shifted into a different world, quiet, wide, open beneath the sky. Darkness did not fall abruptly, it settled slowly like a heavy cloth draped over rooftops, softening edges, dimming colors, and leaving only scattered lamps to remind people of the living city below. In these softened hours, Babylon felt closer to the heavens than at any other moment. But there is one detail we rarely notice. The flat rooftops of Babylon were not merely part of architecture. They were extensions of daily life, sleeping spaces, gathering spaces, places where heat loosened its hold and the world opened into air and stars. During the hottest seasons, families climbed narrow stairways to escape the heavy warmth inside their mud-brick rooms. Up here, the night breeze felt almost sacred. It brushed the skin with relief after long hours under the sun. Reed mats were unrolled, blankets, aired throughout the day on parapets, were spread in tidy rows. Children pointed at stars, whispered small stories, or giggled softly before sleep finally wrapped around them. And yet the night quietly hid one more layer. Rooftops created an intimacy that daytime rarely allowed. Voices softened into murmurs, movement slowed, families settled into small clusters, close enough to feel presence, spaced enough to breathe. A mother brushed dust from her child's hair, an elderly man shifted carefully, easing the weight on his joints. Dogs curled beside doorways, their ears twitching at sounds only they could interpret. Even ordinary objects, water jars, baskets, folded cloths, felt transformed at night, touched by moonlight and cool air. Shadows cast by lamps stretched long across flat surfaces, turning rooftops into quiet chambers open to the sky. From above, Babylon appeared like a mosaic of softly glowing points. Lamps flickered through doorways, courtyards shimmered with warm orange light. Some rooftops carried their own small lamps, placed in corners sheltered from the wind. From far enough away, the city resembled a field of dying embers, glowing gently beneath the night. Through these scattered lights, shadows moved, the slow figure of a watchman, a wandering dog, a neighbor crossing between houses to share a few quiet words. The city breathed, even in silence. Night watchmen shaped much of the city's nocturnal rhythm. They walked with steady patience, tapping wooden staffs or shaking rattles to signal their presence. The sound was not harsh, it was rhythmic, spaced, almost soothing.
In a world of mudbrick, wood, and woven reed, fire was always a danger. Watchmen scanned for smoke, listened for distress, and noted any movement in alleys. For families lying awake on rooftops, their measured footsteps became a kind of lullaby, proof that someone remained awake, guarding the sleeping world. Above all, it was the sky that defined Babylon's night. Without bright lamps or polluted air, the stars appeared with a clarity that feels almost unimaginable today. Priests and astronomers studied constellations from temple platforms. Ordinary people watched them from their rooftops, recognizing familiar shapes passed down in stories. Parents answered children's quiet questions about stars, often repeating ancient tales of gods crossing the heavens. The vastness above did not frighten them, it steadied them, reminding all who gazed upward that life followed rhythms far older than any king or city. Sometimes faint music drifted through the air, a lyre plucked lazily on a neighboring roof, a gentle humming as someone folded blankets or prepared bedding. This music blended with the whisper of wind weaving between buildings. The Euphrates added its own soft cadence, the lapping of water, the creak of moored boats, the distant dip of oars if someone crossed the river late at night. Together, these sounds created a serene tapestry that wrapped around the city. Babylon's nights were not silent, they were spacious, patient, unhurried. But even here, the night held one more secret. Babylonians believed that invisible forces moved most freely after sunset. Protective amulets tied to children's wrists glinted faintly in lamplight. Mothers whispered quick blessings when babies stirred. Small clay figurines, lions, fish, protective spirits, were placed near rooftop stairways to guard the home's boundary. These rituals were not dramatic, they were soft, instinctive gestures woven into daily life. Dreams, too, shaped the meaning of night. Families treated dreams with respect, believing they carried messages, warnings, encouragements, glimpses of things beyond ordinary sight. As they lay beneath the stars, someone might whisper a dream from the night before. A parent offered comfort, a sibling listened with curiosity. A dream of overflowing water might hint at abundance or concern. A dream of broken pottery could warn of loss. Stories and interpretations flowed gently across mats and blankets, forming a quiet communal ritual. The coolness that settled over rooftops changed subtly through the night. In early evening, warmth still clung to bricks. By midnight, air slid softly across skin, lifting sweat and easing tired muscles. Near dawn, temperatures dipped low enough for sleepers to pull blankets tighter. Children rolled toward parents for warmth, adults shifted positions quietly, careful not to disturb others. These small adjustments created a sense of togetherness, bodies responding to night's changes in quiet harmony. Occasionally, clouds drifted across the moon, dimming the city further. Lamps flickered in response. Watchmen paused to adjust wicks. Dogs lifted their heads, sensing altered wind currents. A neighbor's soft voice might call across rooftops, asking if someone needed help with a restless infant or a jar knocked over by the breeze. Even after dark, Babylon's community remained connected. Small gestures, soft words, simple attentiveness. As the deepest part of the night settled, the city entered its most vulnerable, most peaceful state. People slept, animals rested, the river moved without resistance, watchmen continued their rounds. Everything felt suspended, balanced between heat and coolness, safety and uncertainty, waking and dreaming. And then gradually, almost imperceptibly, the sky began to pale. Shadows loosened. Rooftop lamps dimmed. Birds stirred along parapets and riverbanks. The last stars shimmered faintly, reluctant to fade. Babylon had not yet awakened, but morning had already placed its first quiet hand upon the world. Soon families would fold blankets. Children would rub sleep from their eyes. Water jars would be lifted and hearths rekindled, but for now, just before dawn, Babylon rested in its most fragile, most beautiful quiet.
Dawn approached Babylon the same way the night had released it, slowly, gently, step by step, as if the sky had hesitated to disturb the resting world beneath it. Darkness did not break, it thinned.
Stars dimmed one by one, sinking into a pale gray that hovered along the horizon. For a moment longer, the city held on to the fragile quiet that existed only just before morning. And in that soft transition, ancient Babylon revealed something subtle. Even its awakening carried a calm patience. But there is one detail we rarely notice. The rooftops woke first. Mats that had felt warm from shared sleep now lay cool under the early air. Sleeping forms shifted, children burrowing deeper into blankets, parents turning toward the faint glow in the east. Dogs stretched long, slow stretches before settling again near stairways. The Euphrates kept its steady rhythm, unbothered by the hour. Above it all, the sky brightened by degrees so slight that only the most attentive eyes could trace them. In these early moments, Babylon felt almost timeless. No footsteps yet echoed in the alleys, no voices rose from courtyards, no tools scraped against stone or clay. The city seemed suspended between rest and awakening, calm not because people imposed quiet, but because the world itself offered it. And yet this gentle moment quietly hid something deeper. With the growing light, colors returned. Mud brick walls softened from cool grays into warm browns. Reed mats regained their faint golden hue. Water jars reflected the first thin streaks of blue. The ziggurat stood in silhouette, its terraces still wrapped in shadow. In a few courtyards, the earliest hearths flickered to life, threads of smoke curling upward, dissolving into the morning air. These were not loud beginnings. They came from small gestures. Someone lifting a jar, someone adjusting a lamp wick, someone stretching after a night beneath the stars. In larger homes, servants arose quietly to begin their tasks. In humbler ones, families moved in natural harmony, each person knowing the rhythm that guided their mornings. Blankets were folded, mats were shaken over the edges of rooftops. Leftover water from the night was poured into shallow bowls for washing faces. Children rubbed sleep from their eyes, hair carrying traces of the night wind. Though the city was preparing to wake, nothing hurried. Even sunlight took its time, sliding along rooftops, settling into alleys, touching palm fronds by the river. The heat had not yet arrived, and for this brief window, Babylon felt gentle in a way daylight rarely allowed. By the time the sun touched the first line of roofs, households were already in motion. Water splashed softly in courtyards, bread dough was kneaded with steady, practiced hands. Dates were sorted, lentils measured, herbs crushed for the noon meal. Fathers tied reed sandals, mothers wrapped garments around children. Elders whispered simple morning prayers at small household shrines, a quiet thankfulness for another night safely passed. This layering of modest actions gave Babylon its pulse. It was a rhythm older than the temples, older than the streets, older than the bricks shaped from river clay. People did not think about it consciously. It carried them the way the river carried boats. Morning flowed into work, work flowed into market life. Market softened into evening. Evening opened into night, and night returned again to this quiet hour of dawn. But even here, in this familiar cycle, one more truth remained. Daily life in Babylon was not simply a sequence of tasks. It was a conversation between people and the world around them. The heat-shaped gestures, the wind set the pace of rest, the river nourished fields and soothed nights. Even silence carried meaning. Those short, still breaths between sounds when someone lifted a pot or tied a knot. If one watched long enough, all these movements revealed a deeper pattern. Babylon lived not through its monuments, but through countless small moments. As the city fully woke, rooftop sleepers descended into their homes. Voices rose a little higher, warm with the remnants of rest. Neighbors called soft greetings across courtyards. Animals stirred. Market workers passed through alleys carrying baskets, ropes, or tools. Temple bells sounded their first low notes, marking the day's beginning. The city was awake, but not yet busy. That came later, with the heat. From the vantage point of dawn, Babylon looked peaceful. Massive walls softened by low light, the ziggurat standing sharp against the brightening sky, smoke drifting upward in narrow ribbons, boats rocking lightly on the river, families preparing breakfast, artisans arranging their tools, farmers moving slowly toward the fields beyond the last row of houses. Even the sounds felt gentle, the muted thud of clay jars, the soft tap of sandals, the distant bray of donkeys greeting the day. In this calm, time itself felt long, unbroken. Children who slept on rooftops grew into adults who taught their own children to do the same. Farmers tended barley as their fathers had. Potters shaped bowls in motions passed down through mothers and grandmothers. Every dawn returned to familiar courtyards in familiar ways. Babylon may have been a world wonder, spoken of across lands, sung about in stories, but for most who lived here, its greatness lay in quieter things. The cool air before sunrise, the warmth of a shared meal, the comfort of routines repeated gently, the whisper of a prayer before the sun climbed too high. As the morning strengthened, shadows shrank, the last stars vanished. Life, steady and ancient, gathered itself for another day. And in this turning of light, a final understanding settles softly. Cities, no matter how grand, live through the hands of ordinary people, through simple gestures, through family bonds, through the soft hum of small tasks repeated faithfully, through thousands of quiet mornings beneath the same rising sun. And now, as we take our final step away from ancient Babylon, let its last images drift gently in your mind. Warm rooftops under fading stars, quiet courtyards waking to dawn, the steady glow of first hearths, and the river carrying echoes of countless forgotten days. Babylon now rests beneath centuries of dust and history, yet its quiet human rhythms still whisper, softly, patiently, to anyone willing to listen.